Hello, thank you. My name is Benjamin Willis. I'm from the Mentor Initiative. I run the communications department. We're a small and agile organisation that deals with reducing deaths and suffering from tropical diseases with a focus on vector control, vector management and health responses. So the Mentor Initiative first dealt with humanitarian emergencies on a mass scale with the 2004 tsunami on Boxing Day. And in that we saw the scale of how a humanitarian crisis can affect the problems of vector-borne diseases and how significant that can be. On the board, we see the risk of dengue from 2012 through to 2020 and the global distribution of the problems of the dengue risk. Here we see Cyclone Nagus in Myanmar in 2008. This affected approximately 2.4 million people, severely affected by this. It destroyed approximately 752,000 households within a single week. And a year on, approximately 500,000 people were still living in makeshift shelters. So the risk from following a natural disaster in these sorts of situations, as we'll see in the photos moving forward, are overcrowded conditions, displaced persons, movement from rural to urban environments, the increase in debris, which obviously, as we know, increases the breeding sites for Aedes diseases, Aedes mosquitoes, and all of the diseases that they bring. The people that we see moving into urban environments will increase the potential for the diseases such as dengue, such as chikungunya, such as all of the other Aedes diseases. The overcrowded conditions that we see are also dealing with living amongst the rubble, the refuse. The conditions are terrible. So how do we treat them? How do we respond to this? We go into the communities, and you can see here some of our IEC information, education and communication materials that we've been using. We involve with the community on a deep level to change their behaviour, to educate people, we use the local population for volunteers. So you can see here we're training them in IRS, training them in larviciding, in entomological mapping. They are looking through, as you can see in the bottom, they're looking through the breeding sites and working out which vectors are at risk. Excuse me. One of the major problems that we deal with when we have a humanitarian emergency is that the wash services are disrupted. So water services are obviously a big problem, and people resort to water containers that they're perfect breeding grounds for Aedes, and they don't understand how to manage these processes. We come in with the larviciding, and also we teach people about scrubbing the containers, scrubbing, emptying out water containers that are in the environment that they're living in. So as we see here, we have people scrubbing out old pots, we have the tyres, we have people scrubbing out water baths that were in the area. These are the areas where the Aedes will breed. These are the problems that will cause a massive increase or a spike in the diseases. And this community involvement is how we teach not only the response to the immediate threat of the Aedes diseases, but also how we change the behaviours for the ongoing process that we leave behind so that people are educated in how to deal with the problems. These are standard practices that we use in most of our responses to humanitarian emergencies. They seem to translate across a range of different diseases, a range of different vector-borne control scenarios. And really the response is translatable to basically any of the humanitarian emergencies wherein we have a massive increase of people in a small location, an increase in breeding sites, an amassing of water, an amassing of rubbish and refuse that collects around, the gathering of people in displaced positions and displaced locations. So, the next one we went to, and throughout this we've been doing other operations across Africa in different countries, but these are the major humanitarian emergencies associated. So in 2010 we had the earthquake in Haiti. Approximately 2.5 million people were living in this zone of substantial intensity. Once again, and this is the point that I really want to drive home, we see the same problems. We see overcrowded conditions, displaced persons moving from rural to more urban environments once the emergency happens and people have to deal with all of the problems of food, the problems of medical access, the problems of lacking shelter and so forth. They move into an area where the increased density of people increases the potential for transmission, the potential for different diseases to combine. So the different serotypes of dengue obviously have a higher potential within these increased densities. And as before, we see rubbish build up. Waste removal, water waste removal would run through the city, was being clogged up by all of the problems of the building collapses, all of the rubble, and then the rubbish builds up. This obviously increases the problems of potential vector breeding sites. The problems compound and expand dramatically and rapidly in these environments. So after the natural disaster occurs, we see the disrupted services, the breeding conditions increase, the tropical diseases are already present and endemic in the countries, and all of these conditions combine to make huge, significant problems with these disease outbreaks. Now, we were in Haiti also dealing with malaria, obviously, so we were also handing out LLINs, long-life insecticide-treated nets. But we had robust medical and diagnosis and treatments. We had diagnostics. We were testing for the various diseases. We were teaching people about cleaning refuse, waste, to protect against the breeding sites, teaching people about water storage protection, how to clean the containers that they were using, how to lie aside the large bodies of water beside the road or gathering around, and really engaging with the local community to reinforce these practices and these behaviours such that once we leave, when we're finished with our work, limited by funding as we may be, the behaviours and the practices have entered into the community mindset. So it's about this sort of reinforcement and re-engagement with the practices that will help prevent the disease moving forward. This moves us to Mozambique. So we are currently working in Mozambique now. The Cyclone Idai and then the follow-up Cyclone Kenneth hit the region really significantly, really hard. Again, we see displaced persons in large bodies of water, large problems of breeding sites, condensed amounts of people, immediate problems of water storage, of waste removal, of all of these potential breeding sites again. Fresh water being stored in unprotected containers, and again, rural populations moving into urban centres. There's a repetition going on here. We see the same thing in all of the humanitarian emergencies. These significant contributing factors to the disease and to the vectors that bring or that transmit them are occurring in each of them in a similar sort of way. Now, here we have Mentor training some of the local volunteers in IRS. I don't have any data yet to show, and I tried to be a little data light because I'm not an entomologist or an epidemiologist. So I don't have anything to show you from Mozambique yet, but we are working in there, and we are seeing, actually we're seeing across most of our programs throughout the world, across Africa and into the Middle East, that there are cases, either signs of and or cases of dengue increasing across them. Okay, on the top right you can see the environments where Mentor works. we are, as I just said, we're seeing signs and or cases of dengue in all of the country programs. It's severely underreported, as you heard from some of my colleagues earlier, and often dismissed as a general fever. And it's frequently the treatment defaults to malaria treatment for fevers where there's where we're in a low medical access area. These similar sorts of problems, based upon the similar sorts of conditions, occur in a similar sort of way, in a similar time frame, following on from any of these major humanitarian emergencies, specifically ones built on natural environment or natural disasters. So, for example, like following a cyclone or following a hurricane or so forth. Now, I did a little bit of research on climate change and the impact on the vector control, the vector disease scenarios or things that will increase the vector diseases in these locations. And according to the IPCC, the tropical cyclone rainfall rates have a 66% or greater likelihood to increase by a 10 to 15% average as climate change increases. Tropical cyclone intensity is likely to increase at least 66% by an intensity of up to 10% with these 2-degree changes in climate change. The proportion of tropical cyclones to reach category 4 or 5 will once again increase with at a similar sort of rate following the impacts of climate change. Where does this leave us as a humanitarian agency dealing with these kinds of crises in vector-borne diseases? Well, one of our biggest concerns and one of the biggest problems that we continue to face is that we don't have, we have difficulties in accessing funding to mobilize as soon as possible after these sorts of massive environmental and health threats. So we face a problem of not being able to respond quick enough, which then embeds the diseases and embeds the problems and obviously causes the outbreaks that we're going to see increasing as climate change continues to expand the potential for these sorts of outbreaks and these sorts of diseases to transmit within the regions. The other one is that, as one of my colleagues earlier was mentioning, there's a siloing between some of the responses and some of the approaches to dealing with humanitarian emergencies. So vector control is often a secondary thought. The first thing we deal with when we're in a humanitarian environment or a humanitarian emergency is, the basics, the water, the shelter, the food. And often the siloing between WASH and vector control misses the fact that everything that is WASH is also vector control. So all of the removal of wastewater, the water storage, these sorts of things are directly impact upon our ability to come in after the fact and deal with the vector control issues that are also that will be causing all of the diseases and the problems that these communities face. So our focus as we move forward as an organization responding to these emergencies is to amalgamate and combine with other organizations that are dealing with the WASH side of humanitarian responses and to incorporate the thoughts and ideas and processes behind the vector control that is related to the WASH activities that they're engaged in. It's our primary focus, and it's perhaps one of the biggest areas that can prevent the outbreak of these diseases in these conditions before they get to becoming the kinds of problems that we're seeing. I would just like to leave you quickly with this. On the left, you can see this is the distribution of Aedes aegypti across Europe before 1960. And on the right, this is the current Aedes albopictus distribution across Europe in 2019 today. The overlap is quite significant. We obviously understand that they can transmit the same diseases. They can both transmit dengue, and although albopictus isn't as capable or significant, the reservoir of the disease continues to exist across these regions, and the concern is that potentially Aedes might reintroduce itself as climate shifts and moves the tropical zone northwards.